Hello, my name is Dr. Amy Dean, and I am the Community Curator for WHYY Willingboro. With me is my co-host, CEO of BoroTV, Mr. Terry McCullum.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to be sharing something a little bit on the spooky side, and I'm not talking about those high taxes in New Jersey. How about there are so many spooky places that are known to be haunted that are right here in Burlington County?
I mean, we're looking at Mount Holly, we're looking at Easthampton, we're also looking at Burlington City. Imagine what you can discover on a Burlington street, a prison, and a mansion.
I guess we're going to find out tonight.
I think so.
Let's go.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Gibson. I'm the director of the Library Company of Burlington here in Burlington City, New Jersey. The library has a long and rich history here in Burlington City. In 1757, the prominent gentlemen in Burlington decided that they wanted to open a library here in Burlington, similar to the library that was in Philadelphia. But because we were still a colony of England at the time, they had to petition King George II of England for permission. Well, that permission arrived in 1758, and the local gentleman proceeded to open the Library Company of Burlington. At the time, the library wasn't actually a physical place, but it referred to a collection of books. These books were kept in prominent parlors in the big houses in town, and every couple of years it would shift from house to house. But I guess they got tired of that, of having people randomly come into their homes every Wednesday to check out books. The first permanent library building was built here in Burlington by our local post office in 1789. It was used as the library building for 75 years until additional funds were found to purchase the land here on Union Street, and the current building was built in 1864. All of the collections were moved over and have been here ever since. With such a long and varied history and lots of colorful characters coming in and out of the library, there are lots of stories about ghosts or hauntings or paranormal activities happening. My favorite in particular is the story of Charlie the caretaker. Several people sensitive to the paranormal claim on different occasions to have spoken or seen a spirit that refers to himself as Charlie. And we did verify that once upon a time, a caretaker actually did work here. His name was Charlie. He's not a scary spirit. We're told that he's very protective of the library. Sometimes it gets us into a little bit of trouble. Our alarms go off in the middle of the night, particularly when something new is going on at the library that he may not like. We were filming a movie here actually a few months ago, and there was quite the disturbance and mess left around in between shoots, and the alarm went off strangely in the middle of the night for the basement for no reason. I came in the next day, had a talk with Charlie. I assured him that everything was good with the library, and we had no problems for the rest of the shoot. So when the library was closed due to COVID, I was in here cleaning the old basement and trying to organize everything, lamenting to myself about being dirty and spending long hours working very hard. And all of a sudden I heard what sounded like someone dropping a ball. Bounce, 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 just like a ball would. And it's rumored that there are two children spirits that like to hang out here in the library. And I thought to myself, well, maybe they're trying to cheer me up, trying to coax me into having some fun. And really that's been my only experience here at the library with our spirits here.
Hello, my name is Lisa Schiller with the City of Burlington, New Jersey. I work for the administration, and I also run the annual Walk with the Ghost tours that tells people a little bit about the history of the City of Burlington. We will be returning in 2022 with the ghost tours. But the brief history of the City of Burlington starts way back in 1624, when the Walloons from Belgium came here and started the first settlement in New Jersey on Burlington Island. Later, in the 1670s, the ship Shield and the ship Kent brought the first settlers from England, which were the Quakers, who brought in and came in and settled here and started with the colonization of the city of Burlington itself. Our history goes way back to the 1600s, And there's legends here too, and one of the legends, the greatest legends that we do discuss and act out in the ghost tours, is the legend of Blackbeard and his pirates, who supposedly came here in the 1600s to bury a treasure one stormy night. He would always have someone guard that treasure, but little did that pirate know, who volunteered, was that by guarding the treasure meant that they would murder you and bury you above the treasure. That way, if anybody tried to dig it up, they would find a dead pirate and dig no further. Well, that stormy night came and went, and people are still wondering to this day, did it ever really happen? Other stories that came were in the early 1900s, supposedly someone saw the Jersey Devil bouncing on a snowy rooftops from rooftop to rooftop. And a policeman, Bobby, was walking down the street and supposedly thought he saw something odd. We never know, but legend has it, it could have been the Jersey Devil.
It's important for people to know and appreciate the history of this library because it is the history of Burlington. The original collection of books weren't just purchased from a Barnes & Noble like we do today. They were actually generously donated by the founding fathers of the library, and they were part of their personal, cherished collections. In these books, we find lots of references to what life was like at the time, what interests the people, whether it was poetry, travel, religious texts. And over the years, we've accumulated even more reference materials, particularly about our history here in Burlington County and Burlington City, all of which can be accessed by the public.
We also go back to more history in the city of Burlington, famous people that were here. So Benjamin Franklin supposedly got gingerbread from a lovely lady at the Revel House, which is located on Wood Street, which was formerly on Pearl Street and moved later during the 60s or 70s. Now we can go further into history by saying that Minor Knowlton, who was an artillery instructor at West Point and teacher to none other than Ulysses Grant, also lived here in Burlington. And during the Civil War, General Grant himself had a home here and lived right across the street from Minor Knowlton, his former teacher. Elias Boudinot lived here in the 1700s, and he was the top-ranking government official for the United States before we gained our independence. He was the highest-ranking official by being the president of the Continental Congress. And later, once we did gain our independence, George Washington was elected. So it is said, one of the other legends that we have here is said that a young Abraham Lincoln, who had General Grant working for him, would stop and visit. He stopped one night, and the legend has it that they had an arm wrestling match. Nobody knows who really won, but my guess would be the president. One of the other things that was interesting is on that fateful night in April, when Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed at Ford's Theater, General Ulysses Grant and his wife were supposed to attend, or were invited to attend, but decided not to come, and decided to come back to Burlington to see their family who lived on Wood Street. Once he got back to the city of Burlington, he was informed of the assassination attempt on the president. He was told that he had to get back to Washington as soon as possible. So once he did, he left his family here in the city of Burlington and got back on the train to head back immediately. And unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln did pass.
So the library isn't just a place where you can come and pick up the newest hot release or the newest DVD, but it's a place where you can come and get in touch with your roots, if you can trace your genealogy back to the settlers in Burlington County, or learn about the unique houses here in town, and all of the events that we have here. So we'd like to invite you to stop on by the Library Company of Burlington, not only to see all of our rich history and our unique artifacts on display here, but also pick up the newest best release or hot new DVD.
We have so much history here. We'd love to share that with everyone here so everybody can know the rich history. So if people want to look things up, they want to stop by and walk the streets and get a feel of the 1600s, the 1700s, and the 1800s, because those homes are still here today and those properties are still here today. So we'd like to have people come and see us here in the city of Burlington. We're rich in history. We are a real treasure.
So stop on by and visit us one day. You may even run into Caretaker Charlie.
So my name is Marissa Bozarth. I am the Museum Curator of History for Burlington County Division of Parks, and I oversee all of our historic sites, the prison museum being one of them. There are stories of the place being haunted that go all the way back to 1833 when the first execution took place from here. It was a man named Joel Cloud who had murdered his girlfriend. He was hanged about 2 miles outside of Mount Holly, but he was brought back here to be buried. He was held in our dungeon, which is on our 3rd floor. They were seeing cigarettes floating in the air. They heard the chain rattling. They were hearing noises coming out of the room. So they all attribute it to Joel, saying that he haunts the dungeon. Guards and prisoners both were afraid to go in there. They didn't want to go anywhere near it, saying that he's still hanging around in there, didn't want to leave. And then just throughout, the next however many years, there's been all kinds of stories of hauntings in the building. We've had everything from visitors who have come in and said they've seen a guy in the basement that looks like a maintenance worker, but there's nobody actually there. That's happened a couple times. We've had paranormal groups in repeatedly. We have them almost every weekend that come in and rent the facility to do investigations. And they have had everything from photographs of full-bodied apparitions to picking up voices on recorders. One of the voices, the one that stands out in my mind because I was here when they recorded it, was we had a group in from New York, so they had the real thick New York accent, so you knew it was them when they were talking. But they came down the women's hallway, and what they were doing was they were recording for like 5 minutes or so, and then coming back to a central space and putting it into a computer and listening to it right away. And they had equipment that shows the decibel levels, and they say that the reason we don't hear ghosts is because the decibel level is so low we can't physically hear it, kind of like a dog whistle the other way. But on the equipment you could see it dip, you can see the sound waves, and they plugged in, and we could hear them down the cell. Everything echoes through the building, so you can hear the people talking. And when they came back, they plugged it in, they listened to their 5 minutes, and at the very end, over top of a woman's voice, kind of overlaps the end of her sentence, there's a man that says, "I love you," clear as day, and the decibel was going normal, and all of a sudden just dropped, like almost off this computer screen. So it's kind of creepy, but kind of nice, because at least they were saying something nice. It wasn't like they were telling you to get out or anything. So we've had things like that go on. For me personally, the most that I've ever had when I've been in here is just feeling like you're not alone. Oftentimes you'll feel like somebody's following you when you're walking down a hallway and you're the only one in the building. Or you feel like somebody's peeking around a corner and looking to see what you're doing. It's more of just an uneasy feeling, knowing that you're not alone when you're the only person here. The museum is a National Historic Landmark. It was built in 1811 by Robert Mills. This was his first independent design and the most modern prison facility at the time that it was constructed. And it was in continuous use until 1965, which made it the longest continually used prison in the United States. There's a couple things about it that make it very unique, at least for 1811 when it was opened. We have fireplaces in all the cells except for the dungeon, so there was heat in the winter. Every cell has a window so that light could come in, and they could also have some ventilation. And a workshop was put into the basement so that the prisoners could learn some sort of skill, usually woodworking, that they could then use when they were released from prison in order to help them be better members of society. While the place was in operation, it held probably any kind of prisoner you can imagine was here. Everything from homelessness up to first-degree murder was all held in the same facility. Men, women, and children. People have a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that kids are in the same prison as adults, but they were treated just like the adults. They were put in a cell with an adult male or an adult female, depending on what and then their crime. And it really didn't matter. Everybody was treated equally when they were here. So the dungeon is on the top floor of the building, right in the middle. It's kind of in a weird place. People, every time we say this is the dungeon, people say, well, why is it here? Because you expect it to be in the basement. But ours is right in the middle, upstairs, where there's action. There's people moving around and there's cells right next to it. That was done purposefully by the architect because it's harder to escape. So if they were in the basement, you could tunnel out easier. When they're upstairs, it's much harder to escape from the building. And it's a unique cell in that it has no fireplace. It has a really small window. The window's only about this big, and it's the only one that doesn't open. It's really high up. It's the only cell with 2 doorways in order to have more security. And whoever was held in there would have been chained to the floor by one ankle. So they could get up and walk around, but it was to prevent them from getting to the doorway. Most people that were held in there, at least for the beginning of our history, were convicted of first-degree murder. So it sort of worked as the death row cell as well. So you didn't want them being able to harm anyone else. Later on, it kind of became a punishment cell. If you tried to escape or you started a fight in the prison, something like that, you might go in there for a day. So it's a unique space to us. Most people don't have a dungeon kind of built like this or in that location. So there were 7 executions that took place in our courtyard. There was a gallows that was built out back. It was rebuilt for every execution. All of them were for first-degree murder. New Jersey had passed a law that you couldn't be executed unless it was first-degree murder. Otherwise, you'd get life in prison or 30, 40 years or something like that. So they were all first-degree murder. They were all open in public. They used to sell tickets. It was like a big social event, unfortunately. But they had, the last one that we had held here was in 1906. And then everything ended up moving up to the state facilities from that point on. We stopped doing executions here. We also had a murder in the basement. That was the only murder in the building. We had a guard and an inmate that were killed by another inmate on November 5th, 1920. There was the inmate that committed the crime was Harry Assay. He was drunk and disorderly charge, was held in the basement in what they called the pen. It was a giant cell with like 20 prisoners in there, and he was to receive medication. And when the guard walked down, Harry King was the guard. He came down, opened the cell door to administer the medication, and Assay hit him over the head with an iron bar and killed him instantly in the hallway. He then went down the hall and killed another inmate, Charles Bartlett, who was working in the kitchen, who happened to just be walking in the hall. He ended up dying in the hospital, but he was hit in the head and the stomach and ended up dying from that. And then they eventually tackled Assay and were able to get him out of the way. He ended up going to state prison for a while for those crimes. Yeah. So the Boston Strangler was here in 1955, January 55, before he was the Boston Strangler. So his real name is Albert DeSalvo. He was stationed at Fort Dix. He was in the military, and he ended up raping a young girl and was brought here. Ended up getting bailed out. And at the time, 1955, it's sort of one person against the other. They don't have stuff we have today, do testing and all that sort of stuff. So there wasn't much you could do about it, but he was discharged from the military because of the offense. And when that happened, he moved back home to Massachusetts. And the rest is history. He became the Boston Strangler, or the supposed Boston Strangler. Yeah, but we had him for a whole 48 hours. Like I said, it was in operation until 1965. Not much changed in 154 years. The only thing they really did was add plumbing and electric to the building. Other than that, it looks exactly like it looked the day that it opened. If you come to visit, it looks like it looked in 1811. So it kind of lends itself to being a kind of creepy little place.
Welcome to Smithville Mansion. I'm Larry Gladfelder, President of the Friends of the Mansion at Smithville. H.B. Smith welcomes you. Agnes Matilda Gilkerson Smith welcomes you. The mansion itself was built in 1840 by the Shreve brothers. They were textile merchants. Their main item will always be calico cloth, but they also had either the first or the very earliest spool thread manufactories in the United States. However, the 1850s was not good for textile people. The embargo was lifted from imported cloth, began coming in at a price that the Shreves could not compete. Shock of bankruptcy was so great that Samuel Shreve died of apoplexy or high blood pressure in 1855. His brother Jonathan immediately goes to Philadelphia, where he tries to unload Shreveville on the commodity market for $250,000. Cannot get a decent opening bid, comes back, redoubles his effort, turns the business around, already suffering from heart disease. Works himself into a fatal heart attack less than a year after his brother. 1865, Hezekiah Bradley Smith comes down from Lowell, Massachusetts, already a very successful manufacturer of woodworking machinery, an inventor as well. And he gives $20,000. Sounds like nothing to us today, but it was a lot of years of average wages. He has what he wants. He will build an empire along with Agnes here on the banks of the Rancocas. She will die very young in 1881, not quite 43. He will survive until 1887 and pass at the age of 71. Is the mansion haunted? Well, many people think so. I have reason to believe it's haunted. There was a velvet type plush chair. One morning, I'm at the Miller organ, and H.B. Smith appears in the chair. He never said anything. He was dressed as he always was dressed, full black pants, black vest and jacket, engineer boots, and his black Stetson hat. 4 times he appeared. I haven't seen him in about 15 years.
One night, after a candlelight, 3 of us were in our kitchen upstairs. And the strange thing was, all the lights were out, all the docents had left, and there was nobody here but 3 ladies. And we heard a noise. So I walked out into the hallway and I said, "Hello, hello." And the next thing I hear is, "Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo." With that, my goosebumps went up. The ladies looked at me, and we vacated the mansion.
Well, we had a young lady here a few years ago who said Agnes was in the hallway upstairs and did not like her. So the young lady retreated.
We had the paranormal group in here, and they have noticed the sounds, recorded sounds, they've recorded orbs. 4 years ago, I had a high school group come in, 2 groups, and one of the teenage girls said, "Stop touching me, stop touching me." And she was talking to her friend he says, "I'm not touching you." With that, the teacher got the kids right out of the room. Evidently, there was something touching a girl. It happened again the second week that another group came in. Different group of children. Same thing happened. This time it was a boy. Teacher again removed him. Of course, they've never come back, so I don't know what happened. Many times that you're in the building, if you're by yourself, whether you're upstairs or you're downstairs, you hear movement and you think there's somebody in the building. But there's nobody here except you. And I have a lot of experience being here by myself, as well Larry has been here lots of times by himself. And we all experience this. Every single one of us that works in the building feels this. We might not see anything, but we can hear things. And we go looking, thinking somebody's here, and there's nobody here except us.